In 2014, one of Bollywood's brightest stars was found dead. Inside his luxury apartment in Mumbai, his name was Aarav Malhotra. At the time, the media compared his fame to legends like Shah Rukh Khan and Ranbir Kapoor. That comparison wasn't random or exaggerated. Aarav had that rare presence, the kind that made directors adjust scripts just to give him more screen time, the kind that made brands sign him for multi-million-dollar endorsements after a single box office hit. Producers called him the future of Bollywood. Fans called him unstoppable. He was only 31. The year before his death had been the biggest of his career. 2 major releases, both crossed the 100 crore mark within weeks. Award nominations followed. Magazine covers described him as the new king of romance. Paparazzi followed him everywhere, especially in Bandra, where he lived in a high-rise overlooking the Arabian Sea. On the surface, everything about his life looked perfect, but perfection, especially in the film industry, is often carefully constructed. On the night of October 17, 2014, that carefully constructed image collapsed at 2:03 a.m. Building security received a call from inside Aarav's apartment. The call lasted 12 seconds. It was cut off before a full sentence could be formed. According to the internal log, all that was heard was heavy breathing and what sounded like something falling. Security went upstairs. What they found would change everything. By sunrise, the news had already begun to spread. By noon, every major entertainment channel in India was running the same headline: Bollywood star Aarav Malhotra found dead, suspected suicide. The official report stated there were no signs of forced entry. The apartment door was locked from the inside. No visible struggle, no weapon, no intruder. The conclusion was delivered quickly. Suicide. No public suicide note was released. Within weeks, the case was formally closed. To the public, it seemed tragic, but straightforward. A young actor, overwhelmed by pressure, fame, expectations, the constant spotlight. It was a narrative people had heard before, but something about it never sat right. Friends who had spoken to Aarav days earlier described him as tired, yes, but not hopeless. One director said Aarav was negotiating a new international project. A co-star mentioned he had recently signed a 3-film contract. His fitness trainer told reporters that Aarav had been talking about big plans for next year. None of that aligned with the image of someone preparing to end his life. Still, the industry moved on. New films were released. New stars emerged. The spotlight shifted, or at least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Behind the scenes, small inconsistencies began to surface. It started with the security footage. The apartment complex in Bandra was known for its strict surveillance system. Cameras covered every entrance, every hallway, every elevator. Residents paid a premium for that security, but on the night Aarav died, several cameras malfunctioned. From 11:42 p.m. until 2:08 a.m., footage from the hallway outside his apartment was missing. A technical error, management said. An internal maintenance report, obtained years later by an independent journalist, described the malfunction as manual interruption. Manual, that word raised eyebrows. Because a manual interruption is not the same as a glitch. It implies someone accessed the control system. The question was never fully answered. Then, there was the hard drive. According to early forensic notes, Aarav kept a personal, external hard drive in his study. It reportedly contained script drafts, personal videos, and financial documents. When police catalogued the apartment, the hard drive was listed, but in the final evidence summary, it was gone. No explanation. When asked about it years later, a retired officer involved in the case claimed he had no recollection of such an item. The housekeeper added another layer of confusion in her first statement. She told investigators she had seen Aarav arguing on the phone earlier that evening. She described his tone as angry and afraid. In her second statement, that detail disappeared. She said she never heard any argument. When confronted by media in 2018 about the contradiction, she refused to comment and later relocated to another city. Why change something so specific? Another strange detail was the timeline. Phone records confirmed that Aarav received a call at 11:18 p.m. The call lasted 7 minutes. The number was registered to a private account, now inactive. At 12:03 a.m., he sent a text message to his assistant, Meera Sethi. "Are you awake?" That was it, Meera responded at 12:07 a.m., asking if everything was okay. He never replied. By 1:17 a.m., a neighbor reported hearing a loud thud, not a scream, not a cry for help, just a heavy, sudden sound. Police arrived at 2:03 a.m., that leaves a gap of 46 minutes between the thud and official arrival. What happened during that window? Investigators insisted there was no evidence of another person inside the apartment. No fingerprints that didn't belong. No forced entry. But critics argue that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. In 2019, 5 years after the case was closed, a short audio clip surfaced online. It was uploaded anonymously to a small discussion forum dedicated to unsolved celebrity deaths. The voice in the clip was believed to be Meera Sethi. In the recording, a woman says quietly, "He told me he was scared. He said they were watching him." The authenticity of the clip was never confirmed. Digital experts said the audio had been compressed multiple times, making forensic verification difficult. Some claimed it was fake. Others insisted it sounded real. But the phrase lingered. They were watching him. Watching him from where? From outside the building? From inside the industry? Or was it paranoia, the result of stress and pressure? Former colleagues described Aarav as ambitious, but cautious. He wasn't known for reckless behavior. He rarely attended late-night parties. He avoided public controversies. However, one investigative report published in 2023 suggested he had recently discovered irregularities in his financial accounts. Large sums allegedly transferred without his direct authorization. The report cited unnamed sources. No official confirmation followed. Meanwhile, one of the officers originally assigned to the case retired earlier than expected and relocated overseas. Attempts to reach him for comment were unsuccessful. Aarav's family repeatedly requested a review of the forensic findings. They questioned bruises briefly mentioned in the first internal report but absent in the final public summary. The response from authorities remained consistent. There was no foul play, but public doubt grew stronger each year. Social media played a significant role. Short documentary-style videos began circulating on YouTube and Instagram, analyzing the timeline frame by frame. Independent creators highlighted inconsistencies. Hashtags demanding justice trended annually on the anniversary of his death. Some viewers believe the case reflects deeper issues within Bollywood power structures, hidden conflicts, silent pressures behind the glamour. Others caution against speculation, reminding audiences that mental health struggles can be invisible. Both possibilities exist, and that's what makes the case so haunting. Because certainty is missing. In 2026, renewed public interest has pushed authorities to review archived evidence once again. Digital forensics teams are reportedly attempting to recover deleted files from devices collected in 2014. Time complicates everything. Memories fade, witnesses move on, records degrade, yet questions remain stubborn. Why were the cameras manually interrupted? Where is the hard drive? Why did testimonies change? Why did the investigation close so quickly? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if this truly was a suicide, why does the story feel incomplete? Sometimes the most powerful details are the quiet ones. A missing file, a 12-second call, a text message with no reply, a life that appeared full of promise, ending without explanation. In the end, what happened inside that apartment may never be fully known, but the silence surrounding it has grown louder over the years, because buried evidence has a way of resurfacing, and silent witnesses don't always stay silent forever. Aarav lived in a high-security building in Bandra, Mumbai. It was the kind of place celebrities choose when they want privacy without sacrificing luxury. The lobby floors were polished marble. The elevators required keycard access after midnight. Security guards rotated in 12-hour shifts, and every corner of the property was covered by surveillance. Cameras, hallways, parking areas, elevators, even the service entrances used by staff. Residents paid for that protection. It was advertised as one of the safest residential towers in the area. That is why what happened on the night of Aarav Malhotra's death continues to raise uncomfortable questions, because in a building where cameras watched every hallway, every elevator, and every entrance, several cameras mysteriously malfunctioned just for 3 hours, according to the official report. The surveillance outage began at 11:42 p.m. and was restored at 2:08 a.m. The explanation given to police was simple: a technical error in the recording system, a temporary disruption, an unfortunate coincidence. But coincidences become harder to accept when they align too perfectly with tragedy. The hallway camera outside Aarav's apartment was among those that stopped recording. So was the elevator camera serving his floor. So was the parking garage camera covering the section where visitor vehicles were usually logged. 3 hours. Police stated there was no evidence of tampering. They concluded the malfunction did not impact the investigation. Case closed. But in 2022, nearly 8 years later, a former building technician came forward anonymously in an interview with an independent investigative journalist. He had worked at the property during 2014. He agreed to speak only if his identity remained protected. His claim was direct. The cameras were not broken. They were not hacked. They were manually disabled from inside the control room. He explained that the building's surveillance system required physical access to override recording functions. According to him, remote interruption was not possible without leaving a digital trace in the system logs. A technical glitch would have affected random cameras across multiple floors. But that night, he said, the outage was concentrated in one specific zone, RFS floor. When asked whether he had proof, the technician admitted he no longer had access to the internal records. However, he claimed he remembered the incident clearly because management instructed staff not to discuss the outage with anyone outside the building. Keep it simple, he said they were told. It was a system error. Why would management give that instruction unless there was concern? The building association later denied any wrongdoing and stood by the original explanation. Still, the doubt remained. Then there were the phone calls. According to early witness statements, Aarav had argued with someone on the phone that night. The housekeeper, in her initial account, described hearing his raised voice from the living room around 10:50 p.m. She said he sounded frustrated. At one point, she claimed she heard him say, "You can't threaten me." That sentence never appeared in the finalized public report. Call logs confirmed that RF received a 7-minute call at 11:18 p.m. The number was registered to a private corporate account. By the time journalists attempted to trace it years later, the account had been deactivated. The identity of the caller was never disclosed. Police described the call as not relevant to the cause of death. Not relevant. That phrase has been repeated in nearly every official statement since. At 12:03 a.m., Aarav sent a text message to his assistant, Meera Sethi. "Are you awake?" Short, simple, almost casual. Meera later told investigators she was at home. She responded 4 minutes later, asking if everything was okay. She received no reply. In interviews, years afterward, she described the message as unusual. Aarav rarely texted that late, unless something urgent was happening. She tried calling him back at 12:15 a.m., but the call went unanswered between midnight and 1:17 a.m. There is no verified activity inside the apartment. At 1:17 a.m., a neighbor in the adjacent unit reported hearing a loud thud. Not a scream, not multiple noises, just a single, heavy sound. He initially assumed something had fallen, perhaps furniture, perhaps equipment from the small home gym Aarav kept in his spare room. He did not immediately call security. At 1:32 a.m., another resident reported hearing what she described as hurried footsteps in the hallway. That statement, however, conflicts with the camera malfunction. With no hallway footage, there was no way to confirm whether anyone moved through that corridor during the outage. Window.security logs indicate that at 1:58 a.m., the control room attempted to contact Aarav's apartment after receiving a brief internal alert signal. The alert lasted 12 seconds before disconnecting. At 2:03 a.m., guards reached his door. Police were notified shortly afterward. From 1:17 a.m. to 2:03 a.m., 46 minutes passed. 46 minutes where no verified visual record exists. No confirmed movement in or out of the apartment. No public release of detailed internal forensic activity during that specific window. What happened in those 46 minutes? Authorities maintain that forensic evidence supports suicide. They point to the locked door, the absence of forced entry, the lack of unidentified fingerprints. But critics argue that high-profile investigations sometimes move with unusual speed. The initial autopsy summary was completed within days. The final ruling was announced within weeks. For a case involving a major celebrity, the process felt accelerated. Why did the investigation move so quickly? Some former legal experts have suggested that media pressure can influence procedural time. The desire to prevent speculation, the need to calm public reaction. A clear narrative is easier to manage than an open-ended mystery. However, speed can also create blind spots. In 2023, a private forensic consultant reviewed publicly available documentation from the case. He noted that the official timeline does not detail precise minute-by-minute movements of security personnel during the outage, nor does it clarify who had authorized access to the control room that night. Access logs from the surveillance system were never made public. If the cameras were manually disabled, someone with authorization would have had to enter that room. Who had that authority? Was there a sign-in record? Was anyone questioned beyond routine statements? Those answers remain unclear. Another layer of unease comes from subtle inconsistencies in early press briefings. In one televised statement, a spokesperson mentioned no external interference detected. In a later written release, that phrase was shortened to no evidence of foul play. The difference may seem small, but language matters in investigations. External interference suggests an active search for intrusion. No evidence of foul play simply means nothing provable was found. There is a gap between those two ideas. Meanwhile, fans continue to analyze the timeline online, frame by frame, minute by minute, comparing statements from 2014 to those made years later, highlighting discrepancies in wording, questioning the disappearance of key details. From early witness accounts, some believe the answer lies in the missing hard drive reported during initial evidence collection. Others focus on the private phone call. A few suspect internal industry conflict. There is no confirmed proof of any of these theories. But the apartment itself has become symbolic. A controlled environment. A secured building. A place where nothing should happen unnoticed. Yet on that night, something did. 3 hours of darkness in a building designed to eliminate blind spots. 46 minutes between a thud and official arrival. A phone call that has never been explained. An investigation that closed with remarkable speed. Was it simply a tragic coincidence of timing and technology? Or was something deliberately obscured? when a system built for constant surveillance fails at the exact moment it is needed most, doubt becomes inevitable, and doubt, once planted, does not disappear easily. The apartment still stands in Ban. New residents have moved in. The hallways are quiet. Cameras continue to record every movement. But for many, that building will always feel slightly wrong. Because on one night in 2014, in a place designed to see everything, something happened that no camera captured. And in those missing hours, the truth may still be waiting. There was one witness who never truly spoke. Her name was Mira Sethi, Aarav Malhotra's personal assistant for almost 4 years. In the fast-moving world of Bollywood, assistants are more than schedulers. They are gatekeepers, confidants, problem solvers, and sometimes the only people who see the star without makeup, without cameras, without performance. Mira managed his calendar, filtered his calls, handled sensitive documents, and often stayed late to make sure everything for the next day was perfectly arranged. On the night Aarav died in his Bandra apartment in Mumbai, she was the last confirmed person to see him alive. Security records show she left the building at approximately 10:32 p.m. Her exit was captured on the lobby camera, one of the few cameras that did not malfunction later that night. She appeared calm. She carried her usual tote bag and spoke briefly to the guard before stepping into a waiting cab. At that point, nothing seemed unusual. In her initial police statement, Mira described Aarav as tired but normal. She said he had been reviewing a script earlier in the evening and had asked her to reschedule a breakfast meeting the next morning. According to her, he mentioned feeling stressed about an upcoming negotiation but did not express despair or hopelessness. She told investigators she had seen him take a phone call shortly before she left. She described his tone as tense. When asked whether she recognized the caller, she said no. That was the official record, after the case was closed and ruled a suicide. Mira gave only one short media statement. In it, she asked the public to respect Aarav's privacy and to avoid spreading rumors. She appeared composed, though visibly shaken. After that, she refused further interviews. Then, in 2019, 5 years after the investigation had officially ended, Mira disappeared from public view. No farewell post, no announcement of a career change. Her professional social media accounts were deleted. Industry contacts said she declined all job offers related to film production. When journalists attempted to reach her, her phone number was no longer active. It was as if she had chosen silence, deliberately. And then came the audio recording. In late 2020, an anonymous account uploaded a short clip to an online discussion forum dedicated to unsolved celebrity cases. The file was less than 2 minutes long. The title simply read, "Listen carefully." The voice in the recording sounded like a woman in her early 30s, calm, controlled. But beneath the calmness, there was tension, a slight tremor in certain words. In the clip, the woman says, "He told me he was scared. He said they were watching him." There is a pause after the word watching, as if she hesitated before finishing the thought. The recording ends abruptly. No context, no date, no explanation. Within hours, the clip spread across social media platforms and video sharing sites. Speculation exploded. Was it real? Was it edited? Was it someone pretending to be Mira? Digital audio experts attempted to analyze the file. Some said the compression levels suggested it had been re-uploaded multiple times, making original metadata impossible to retrieve. Others claimed the voice pattern closely matched Mira's past interviews, though none could confirm with certainty. Law enforcement did not issue a formal statement regarding the clip, but for many followers of the case, it changed everything, because if the voice was truly Mira, then her words contradicted the official narrative. He told me he was scared. Scared of what? And more importantly, who were they? The use of that single word opened countless possibilities. Some investigative journalists began revisiting Aarav's final months. They examined his financial records, business partnerships, and endorsement contracts. A few independent reports suggested he had recently questioned irregular transactions linked to a production company he was associated with. Large sums had allegedly moved through shell accounts. There was no confirmed evidence tying Aarav to wrongdoing, but the timing raised eyebrows. Other commentators focused on industry politics. Bollywood, like many major film industries, is known for intense competition, high-stakes negotiations, and powerful networks behind the scenes. Whispers of rivalry, contract disputes, and influence are not uncommon. Still, there was no proof connecting any of those factors to his death. Just whispers. And in this case, whispers became louder than facts. Friends close to Aarav described him as ambitious but cautious. He understood the business side of cinema. He read contracts carefully. He preferred private meetings over public confrontations. It seemed unlikely he would make vague statements about being watched without reason, unless he felt something real. In a separate interview conducted before her disappearance, Mira was asked whether Aarav had seemed paranoid in his final days. She paused before answering. She said, "He was under pressure. A lot of people wanted things from him." That answer now feels heavier in hindsight. A lot of people wanted things from him: money, influence, endorsements, access. Success attracts attention. Not all of it friendly. There were also reports that Aarav had recently changed his phone security settings. According to a former colleague, he began using encrypted messaging apps more frequently in the months before his death. When asked about it casually, he reportedly joked, "Can't be too careful these days." Was it just a joke? Or was it a sign he believed someone was monitoring him? In 2022, an independent documentary filmmaker attempted to contact Mira through extended family members. They confirmed she had relocated, but declined to share her whereabouts. They insisted she wanted to live a quiet life, away from media attention. That choice is understandable. Being linked to a high-profile death can be overwhelming. Online harassment, conspiracy theories, constant scrutiny, it can destroy a person's sense of safety. But her silence continues to fuel suspicion. Because if the official conclusion was accurate, why withdraw completely? Why erase every digital trace? Of course, silence does not equal guilt, nor does it confirm hidden knowledge. Trauma affects people differently. Some choose to speak, others choose to disappear. Yet the timing remains difficult to ignore. 5 years of relative quiet, then disappearance, then an anonymous audio clip. It reads like a script from a thriller film, but this is not fiction. The question of they remains unanswered. Were they financial partners? Industry rivals? Anonymous online threats? Or was it simply the vague fear of someone overwhelmed by fame and expectation? Mental health experts have pointed out that anxiety can manifest as feelings of being watched or targeted, especially under extreme stress. Without direct testimony from Aarav himself, interpretation becomes speculative, and that is the core problem of this case. Every potential explanation has an alternative. Every theory has a counterargument. Investigative reporters who pursued the financial angle found incomplete records but no definitive criminal link. Those who examined industry rivalries uncovered tension but no documented threats. Analysts who studied the audio recording concluded it could not be authenticated. Beyond reasonable doubt, no proof, just fragments. But fragments can be powerful. The image of a successful Bollywood star, confiding in his assistant that he felt watched, contradicts the public perception of confidence and control. It introduces vulnerability, fear. And fear changes the narrative. Because if Aarav truly believed someone was watching him, then the malfunctioning cameras on the night of his death take on a darker tone. If he truly felt threatened, then the unexplained phone call becomes more significant. if he truly expressed fear, then the speed of the investigation feels more unsettling. Still, it is important to separate emotion from evidence. There is no verified document confirming he reported threats to authorities. No official complaint. No recorded statement using the word they. Only a voice in a leaked clip, a voice that may or may not belong to Meera Sethi. Yet, in the absence of transparency, even uncertainty becomes suspicious. Today, when people revisit the Aarav Malhotra cold case, they often focus on forensic details or surveillance gaps, but others return to that simple sentence in the recording. He told me he was scared. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is quiet. And sometimes quiet statements are the most unsettling because they suggest something unresolved, something incomplete. Whether Meera Sethi holds the key to understanding what happened inside that apartment, no one can say for sure. She may simply be a grieving assistant who chose privacy over publicity, or she may know details she has never shared until she speaks publicly again. If she ever does, the silence remains, and in a case already defined by missing footage, missing data, and missing clarity, one more layer of silence only deepens the mystery. For now, all that exists are questions. Who were they? What did Aarav believe was happening around him? Was he caught in something larger than films and fame? Or was his fear internal, invisible, misunderstood, no proof? Just whispers carried across years, and in this story, whispers are all anyone has. In 2023, nearly 9 years after the death of Bollywood actor Aarav Malhotra shocked the nation, an independent investigative journalist formally filed a petition to reopen the case. By then, public interest had resurfaced through online documentaries, true crime forums, and viral breakdown videos analyzing the timeline of that night in Bandra, Mumbai. What had once been accepted as a tragic but closed chapter was now being questioned again, piece by piece. The journalist did not present a dramatic new witness or a sudden confession. Instead, the petition focused on something quieter: forensic inconsistencies. Small details that, when viewed individually, seemed insignificant, but when placed together, they formed a pattern that did not fully align with the official ruling of suicide. The review began with scene reconstruction, using original photographs obtained through legal requests. Independent forensic analysts re-examined the physical positioning inside Aarav's apartment. According to the early police narrative, there were no signs of struggle. Furniture was described as undisturbed. The environment was presented as consistent with self-inflicted harm. However, high-resolution analysis of the archived images suggested subtle irregularities. The angle of the body, as captured in the first responding officer's camera, appeared slightly inconsistent with the gravity pattern expected based on the official explanation. One analyst noted that the shoulder alignment did not match the reported mechanism. Another pointed out that the distribution of weight seemed unusual compared to documented case studies with similar conclusions. These observations did not prove foul play, but they raised technical questions. Then there was the positioning of furniture. In one early internal photograph, a side table near the living area appeared slightly displaced. In the finalized evidence summary released publicly, the report described the room as orderly and undisturbed. The displacement was never mentioned. Was it simply overlooked, or was it deemed irrelevant? Independent experts argued that even minor shifts in furniture can indicate movement prior to death, not necessarily a struggle, but movement. Why was that detail omitted from the final summary? Another element involved bruising. In the preliminary autopsy documentation, which was partially accessed through legal channels years later, there was a brief reference to superficial bruising on Aarav's upper arm. The notation described it as non-fatal, minor, origin undetermined. In the finalized public autopsy summary, that line no longer appeared. When questioned about the omission, officials stated that minor bruising can occur for many reasons, and was not connected to the cause of death. That explanation is medically reasonable, but critics argue that removing any documented injury from a final report without clarification invites suspicion. Why not include it and explain it? Transparency eliminates doubt. Omission creates it. As the journalist continued reviewing documents, another issue surfaced. Several pages from the early investigation file were marked restricted. Access requests were submitted on behalf of Aarav's family. Denied. The official reason cited: procedural confidentiality and privacy regulations. His family publicly expressed frustration. In interviews, they stated they were not seeking to assign blame. They simply wanted full clarity, complete access to the findings surrounding their son's final hours. Repeatedly, they were told the case had been thoroughly investigated and legally concluded. The petition filed in 2023 argued that advancements in forensic science warranted a second look. Technology had evolved significantly since 2014. Digital reconstruction tools, ENHANCED, injury pattern analysis, and improved biomechanical modeling could offer insights not available during the initial examination. The request was not emotional, it was technical. Re-examine the physical evidence. Reevaluate the autopsy with updated methodology. Reconstruct the scene using modern simulation software. The petition also highlighted inconsistencies in documentation formatting, timestamp discrepancies between internal logs, minor wording changes between draft and finalized reports. None individually alarming, but collectively unusual. Meanwhile, one detail continued to attract attention. A former police officer who had been part of the original investigative team retired earlier than expected in 2016 and relocated overseas. At the time, his departure was not considered suspicious. Officers retire, careers change, but when journalists attempted to contact him years later for comment regarding the reopened petition, he declined all interviews. He did not issue a public statement. He did not respond to written questions. Silence, again. Was it pressure? Was it simply a desire to avoid media attention? Or was there internal disagreement within the investigative team that never became public? There is no confirmed evidence suggesting corruption, no documented proof of coercion, but in high-profile cases involving public figures, perception carries weight. Some legal observers suggested that the rapid closure of the case in 2014 may have been influenced by a desire to prevent prolonged media frenzy. A definitive conclusion stabilizes public reaction. It reduces speculation. It allows institutions to move forward. However, speed can sometimes limit depth. One forensic consultant, reviewing the publicly available material in 2024, commented that the original investigation appeared procedurally correct, but narrowly framed. In other words, once suicide became the working theory, evidence may have been interpreted within that framework rather than challenged against alternative possibilities. That is not an accusation, it is a caution often discussed in criminal psychology. Confirmation bias can shape investigative focus. As public interest grew in 2025 and 2026, digital platforms amplified the debate. Long-form video analysis broke down the physical evidence in accessible terms. Legal experts were invited to discuss procedural transparency. Former forensic professionals explained how even subtle body positioning can sometimes indicate external involvement. At the same time, mental health advocates urged caution. They warned against turning tragedy into conspiracy without definitive proof. They reminded audiences that suicide cases often contain complexities that outsiders struggle to understand. Both perspectives hold validity. The central issue remains unanswered. Why were certain details minimized? or removed from final reports? Why are specific pages still restricted? Why resist independent forensic review if the conclusion remains unchanged? Official statements maintain that there is no evidence of foul play in the death of Aarav Malhotra. Authorities emphasize that reopening a case requires substantial new material, not speculation. But the petition argued that incomplete transparency itself qualifies as substantial concern. When information is withheld, doubt expands. When access is denied, suspicion grows, and in a case already marked by missing surveillance footage, conflicting witness statements, and unexplained phone activity, even minor forensic inconsistencies feel amplified. The phrase "buried evidence" began trending online not because of dramatic discoveries, but because of absence. Missing pages, edited summaries, omitted lines. Nothing explosive, just quiet reductions. The family continues to request full disclosure. They state publicly that closure requires clarity. Without it, questions persist across generations. Was it negligence? Was it administrative simplification? Or was it something darker that never fully surfaced? There is no proven answer, but the longer transparency is delayed, the louder the questions become. In early 2026, discussions regarding potential judicial review gained renewed momentum. Legal analysts debated whether public interest in technological advancement justify limited re-examination under supervised oversight. If such a review occurs, it may not change the official ruling. It may confirm it, or it may reveal overlooked nuances. Until then, the case remains suspended between conclusion and doubt. A closed file in official archives, an open wound in public memory. The more questions asked, the quieter the official answers have become, and sometimes, in investigations involving power, fame, and influence, silence is not the end of the story, it is the part that waits. In early 2026, something shifted. For years, the death of Bollywood actor Aarav Malhotra had existed in a strange space between closure and doubt. Officially ruled a suicide, publicly accepted by many, quietly questioned by others. But as digital media evolved and long-form investigative content gained global traction, the case returned to the spotlight with renewed intensity. This time, it wasn't just gossip. It was organized. Online campaigns calling for transparency began trending across platforms. Documentary-style breakdowns of the timeline accumulated millions of views. Legal analysts, former forensic consultants, and digital security experts were invited into live-stream discussions dissecting every known detail. Hashtags demanding a full independent review surged on the anniversary of his death. Fans did not ask for speculation. They asked for clarity. The pressure became difficult to ignore. In February 2026, authorities confirmed that the case would undergo a limited procedural review. The statement was brief and carefully worded. The original conclusion was not overturned. No admission of error was made. Instead, officials described it as a supplementary reassessment in light of technological advancements and public interest. It was not dramatic, but it was significant. Archived evidence was retrieved from storage. Digital devices collected in 2014, including Aarav's laptop and mobile phones, were transferred to a specialized cyber forensic laboratory. Advances in data recovery tools meant that information once considered permanently deleted might now be partially reconstructed. However, technology cannot reverse time. Data degrades. Storage drives suffer corruption. Encryption standards evolve. Some applications used in 2014 no longer exist in their original form. Recovering fragments is possible. Restoring complete context is far more difficult. Digital forensic teams began the slow process of extracting residual metadata, analyzing communication patterns, and mapping call logs more precisely than before. They focused particularly on the private number that contacted Aarav hours before his death. Whether that lead would yield new insight remained uncertain. Meanwhile, physical evidence was re-examined under updated analytical models. Biomechanical software simulations recreated body positioning scenarios based on the original photographs. Forensic pathologists reviewed autopsy notes using contemporary comparative databases. Subtle details previously categorized as inconclusive were reassessed. But time changes evidence. Memories fade. Witnesses relocate. Some individuals involved in the original investigation have since retired. Others declined to participate in renewed interviews. One former officer reiterated through legal counsel that the original procedures were thorough and compliant with standards at the time. From a procedural standpoint, that may be accurate. Yet public perception operates differently. When questions persist for over a decade, they take on weight. The re-examination process also extended to financial records. Independent auditors reviewed transaction histories surrounding Aarav's production agreements and endorsement contracts during his final year. The objective was not to imply wrongdoing but to eliminate ambiguity. Financial stress, hidden disputes, or contractual pressure can significantly impact mental health. Clarifying those elements was considered essential. No immediate evidence of criminal coercion was publicly identified. Still, investigators acknowledged that certain financial structures were complex and layered, making retrospective interpretation challenging. At the same time, psychological experts were consulted to provide context regarding behavioral patterns in high-profile individuals facing extreme public pressure. They emphasized that outward success does not eliminate internal struggle. Public confidence does not negate private anxiety. This perspective matters because amid renewed investigation, it is easy to overlook the human dimension. If this was a suicide, then the tragedy lies in misunderstanding, stigma, and perhaps missed signs of distress. If it wasn't, then the implications are far darker. Who benefits from silence? That question has echoed repeatedly across commentary panels and investigative documentaries. In cases involving fame and influence, silence can serve many purposes. It can protect reputations. It can shield institutions. It can prevent destabilization of financial networks. Or it can simply preserve privacy in the face of overwhelming scrutiny. There is no confirmed evidence proving a coordinated effort to conceal truth, but absence of evidence does not automatically equal absence of motive. As the review continued, throughout 2026, authorities maintained that no arrests had been made. No official revision of the cause of death had been announced. The case status remained formally described as under review. That phrase carries ambiguity. Under review does not mean overturned. It does not confirm suspicion. It simply acknowledges that questions remain worthy of examination. Public reaction has been divided. Some believe the renewed scrutiny offers overdue transparency. Others argue it risks reopening wounds for family members who have endured years of speculation. Mental health advocates caution against framing tragedy as conspiracy without definitive proof. Legal experts stress that investigations must rely on evidence, not online momentum. Yet, momentum influences action. Without millions of viewers revisiting the timeline, without consistent public demand for document access, it is unlikely the review would have occurred. The digital age has altered how cold cases are remembered. Information circulates globally within minutes. Archival interviews resurface. Minor inconsistencies become focal points. Citizen investigators analyze details, once confined to official files. This shift creates both opportunity and risk. Opportunity for accountability, risk of distortion for Aarav's family. The renewed review represents something simpler. Answers, not necessarily dramatic revelations, not necessarily courtroom outcomes, just clarity. They have repeatedly stated that if the original conclusion is reaffirmed after comprehensive revaluation, they will accept it. What they struggle to accept is partial access and restricted documentation. Transparency can bring peace. Secrecy prolongs doubt. Today, more than a decade after his death, the image of Aarav Malhotra remains suspended between two narratives. In one, he is a talented actor overwhelmed by invisible internal battles, whose life ended in private despair. In the other, he is a rising star, caught in forces beyond his control, silenced before he could expose something larger. Only one of those narratives can be true. Or, perhaps the truth lies somewhere less dramatic, but equally complex. As forensic teams continue their work, progress updates are rare. Authorities have emphasized that premature disclosure could compromise procedural integrity. In other words, silence remains part of the process, and silence is powerful. It allows imagination to expand. It allows doubt to survive. It allows unresolved questions to echo. Was Aarav Malhotra a troubled star who ended his own life? Or was he silenced? Right now, there is no new official conclusion, no arrests, no public admission of investigative error, only an open review and a case file once again active. Sometimes, the loudest truth is hidden behind the quietest rooms, behind archived storage boxes, behind restricted pages, behind servers holding fragments of deleted conversations. And sometimes, the real story is not only what is buried, it is who ensured it remained that way. Until the review concludes, the case stands in suspension, a symbol of how fame, power, technology, and public memory intersect. A reminder that, in the digital era, closure is no longer determined solely by official declaration. It is determined by whether the questions stop. In this case, they haven't. And until they do, the silence surrounding Aarav Malhotra's final night will continue to speak louder than any statement released to the press.